What happens when a country music superstar's patience runs out on live television? In just 20 seconds, one question turned a friendly conversation into an explosive showdown that has everyone talking. Before we get into this absolute chaos, make sure you hit that subscribe button right now. We drop daily videos exposing Hollywood's darkest scandals, and trust me, you don't want to miss what's coming next. Last night on the Jennifer Hudson Show, what started as a celebration of Jelly Roll's incredible journey turned into one of the most uncomfortable moments in daytime television history. The tension was building from the moment the cameras started rolling, and nobody saw what was coming. This wasn't just another celebrity interview gone slightly awkward. This was a full-scale meltdown that had the entire audience sitting in shocked silence, producers scrambling behind the scenes, and cameras capturing every brutal second of the collision between two very different perspectives on redemption and respect. Jennifer Hudson welcomed Jelly Roll onto her stage with her signature bright smile and warm energy. The audience was excited, cheering as the tattooed musician walked out in his usual casual style, looking relaxed and ready to share his story. He gave the crowd a wave, sat down in the guest chair, and settled in with the kind of ease that comes from doing hundreds of interviews. Jennifer started off talking about his music, his recent awards, and how far he'd come in his career. Jelly Roll was smiling, nodding along, clearly appreciating the love. The band had just played one of his hit songs during the walkout, and the energy in the room felt positive and uplifting. "You've had such an amazing year," Jennifer said, leaning forward in her chair with genuine enthusiasm in her voice. "Your music has touched so many people, and your story about turning your life around is inspiring millions. I mean, you went from struggling, from being in really dark places, to selling out arenas and winning awards. I want to talk about that journey with you today, because I think so many people need to hear it." Jelly Roll seemed comfortable at first, talking about his music and how grateful he was for his fans. His voice was warm and sincere as he explained his approach to songwriting. "I just try to be honest, you know? I write about real life, real pain, real struggle, because that's what connects with people. They're tired of fake stuff. They want to know they're not alone in what they're going through." He spoke about writing songs that meant something, about being real with people, and about not pretending to be perfect. "I'm not trying to be some polished pop star. I'm a dude who's been through hell and made it out the other side. That's my message. That's what I want people to know is possible." The audience was eating it up, clapping after every heartfelt statement he made. There were nods of agreement throughout the crowd, and you could feel the emotional connection building between the artist and the people watching. Jennifer was smiling, seeming to appreciate his authenticity and rawness. For the first few minutes, everything seemed to be going perfectly. This looked like it was going to be one of those inspiring interview segments that gets shared all over social media with captions like "Faith in Humanity Restored" or "This Made Me Cry." But then Jennifer shifted gears, and you could almost feel the temperature in the room change. She brought up his past, the struggles he'd faced before his music career took off. At first, it seemed like a natural part of the conversation. After all, Jelly Roll has been open about his history, his mistakes, and how he changed his life. He's talked about it in podcasts, in his music, in previous interviews, but the way Jennifer kept pushing, kept asking more detailed questions, asking him to relive specific moments, started to make things uncomfortable. There was something in her tone, something in the way she was framing the questions, that felt less like curiosity and more like interrogation. "Let's talk about your time in the system," Jennifer said, and you could see Jelly Roll's expression change slightly. His smile didn't quite reach his eyes anymore, and his body language shifted from relaxed to guarded. "You spent time behind bars. You've talked about being involved in things you're not proud of. You've mentioned drug dealing. You've mentioned making really bad choices that hurt people. How does that past affect your life now, especially as a father? I mean, how do you explain that to your kids?" Jelly Roll took a breath, still trying to keep things positive despite the discomfort creeping into his voice. "You know, Jennifer, I've been very open about my past because I want people to know that you can change. I'm not that person anymore. I'm not making those choices anymore. I'm focused on my family, my music, and helping people who are going through what I went through. My kids know their dad made mistakes, but they also see the man I am today. They see someone who owns his past and works every day to be better. Jennifer nodded, but she didn't move on like most hosts would. Instead, she dug deeper, pressing into wounds that Jelly Roll had already spent years healing. But there are people who say that once you've made certain choices, once you've gone down that path, once you've hurt people and broken the law, can you really change? Can someone with your background truly be a role model? I mean, you're influencing young people now. You have fans who are teenagers, who are children. Their parents see your tattoos. They hear about your criminal record, and they worry. What do you say to those parents who think maybe you're not the best influence? The audience got quiet. You could feel the shift in the room like a physical thing, like the air itself had gotten heavier. People stopped smiling. The warm, fuzzy feeling from moments before evaporated completely. Jelly Roll's jaw tightened, and he sat up straighter in his chair, his hands gripping the armrests. You could see him processing what she'd just said, trying to figure out if he'd heard her correctly. "Are you seriously asking me that right now?" he said, his voice still controlled but with an unmistakable edge to it. "Are you really sitting here questioning whether I can be a role model because I made mistakes when I was younger? I thought I was here to talk about my music and my message, not to be judged for mistakes I made years ago that I've already paid for. I did my time. I changed my life. What more do you want from me?" Jennifer held up her hands defensively, but there was something in her expression that suggested she wasn't backing down. "I'm not judging you, Jelly Roll. I'm really not. I'm just asking the questions that people want to know. I mean, your story is about redemption, right? That's what you talk about in your music, in your interviews. So we have to talk about what you're being redeemed from. We have to talk about the reality of those choices and their consequences. That's just being honest. There's a difference between talking about redemption and trying to make someone feel like they'll never be good enough." Jelly Roll shot back, his voice getting louder now. The cameras captured every second of the tension building between them, zooming in on his face, on Jennifer's face, on the audience members who were looking increasingly uncomfortable. "I've been honest about everything. I've never hidden who I was or what I did. I've put it in my music. I've talked about it in therapy. I've addressed it with my family. But I'm not that person anymore, and I'm damn proud of the work I've put in to be better. I've spent years working on myself, going to therapy, making amends, being a good father, creating music that helps people. What else do I need to do to prove I've changed?" Jennifer wasn't backing down, though. She leaned forward, her tone getting sharper, more pointed. "But Jelly Roll, you're influencing young people now. You're a public figure with a platform. You have millions of followers. Young kids are listening to your music. They're looking up to you. Don't you think parents have a right to question whether someone with your history, someone who sold drugs, someone who spent time in jail, should be held up as an example? I'm not saying you haven't changed, but the concern is real." That's when you could see Jelly Roll's patience completely snap. His face flushed red, and he pointed a finger at Jennifer, his voice booming across the studio. Hold on. Are you really sitting here on national television trying to tell me that I can't be an example because I made mistakes when I was younger? You know what? That's exactly the kind of thinking that keeps people trapped. That's the mentality that tells people they can't change, they can't grow, they can't be forgiven. That's the mentality that makes people give up because they think society will never accept them no matter how hard they work to be better. The audience was completely silent now. Some people looked shocked, their mouths literally hanging open. Others looked uncomfortable, shifting in their seats, not knowing where to look. A few people in the back were whispering to each other, probably trying to figure out if this was staged or if they were witnessing a real meltdown. Jennifer tried to regain control of the situation, but you could see she was caught off guard by the intensity of his reaction. "I think you're misunderstanding what I'm saying," she started, but Jelly Roll wasn't having it. "No, I understand perfectly. Jelly Roll interrupted, his voice booming across the studio with such force that people in the back rows flinched. You brought me here to talk about my music, my message, my journey, and instead you're trying to tear me down. You're trying to make me feel like I'm not worthy of the success I've earned through hard work and dedication. You're sitting here implying that I'm a bad influence, that parents should be worried about their kids listening to my music. Do you have any idea how insulting that is? Do you have any idea how hurtful it is to have someone question whether you deserve to be where you are? Jennifer's expression hardened. She clearly didn't like being challenged on her own show, in front of her audience, with cameras rolling. Her voice took on a defensive edge. I brought you here to have an honest conversation. This is what journalism is, Jelly Roll. This is what real interviews look like. If you can't handle honest questions about your past, if you can't handle a little bit of pushback, maybe you're not as comfortable with it as you claim to be. Maybe there's still some shame there that you need to work through. The tension in the room was absolutely suffocating. You could have heard a pin drop. Jelly Roll stood up from his chair, towering over the stage. His fists were clenched at his sides, and you could see he was trying with everything in him to control his anger. His chest was heaving, his face was red, and his jaw was so tight you could see the muscles working. Shame? You think this is about shame? His voice was shaking now, not from fear but from barely controlled rage. I'm not ashamed of who I was because that person led me to who I am now. But what I won't do is sit here and let you use my past as a weapon against me. What I won't do is let you question my character, my worthiness, my ability to be a positive influence, when you don't know shit about the work I've done, the lives I've touched, the people I've helped. Watch your language, Jennifer snapped, standing up herself now. This is my show, and you need to show some respect. Respect? Jelly Roll laughed, but it was a harsh, bitter sound. You want to talk about respect? Where was the respect when you invited me here under false pretenses? Where was the respect when you decided to ambush me with accusations disguised as questions? You want honest? Here's honest. This whole thing was a setup. You invited me here knowing you were going to try to embarrass me, to make me look bad on your show, to get a viral moment at my expense. That's not journalism, Jennifer. That's character assassination. That's you trying to boost your ratings by tearing down someone who's actually trying to make a difference. Jennifer stood up too, matching his energy, her voice sharp and cutting. I don't need to set you up, Jelly Roll. These are legitimate questions based on your own public history. You're the one who put it out there. You're the one who talks about it in your songs, in your interviews. If you can't answer questions about it without losing your temper, that's on you. That says more about where you are in your healing journey than anything I've asked. I've answered these questions 1,000 times, Jelly Roll shouted, his voice echoing through the studio so loud that the sound technicians probably scrambled to adjust their levels. I've been on podcasts, interviews, documentaries, and I've been nothing but honest. I've talked about my struggles, my addiction, my time in jail, the people I hurt, the mistakes I made. I've been transparent about all of it. But you're not asking questions, Jennifer. You're making accusations. You're trying to paint me as someone who doesn't deserve to be here, someone who should still be paying for mistakes from a decade ago. That's not what I'm doing at all, Jennifer fired back, but her defensive tone suggested maybe she was starting to realize she'd pushed too far. I'm trying to have a nuanced conversation about redemption and accountability. Nuanced? Jelly Roll cut her off, his voice dripping with sarcasm and frustration. There's nothing nuanced about asking me if I deserve to be a role model. There's nothing nuanced about questioning whether parents should let their kids listen to my music. You basically just told your entire audience that I'm not trustworthy, that my past makes me dangerous, that I'm somehow corrupting young people by existing in the public eye. The producers were starting to panic behind the cameras. You could see crew members moving around frantically, unsure of what to do. Some were talking urgently into their headsets, probably getting instructions from the control room. This was spiraling out of control fast, and everyone knew it. This wasn't the kind of dramatic moment that gets edited into a promo. This was the kind of moment that becomes a PR nightmare. Jennifer crossed her arms, her face stern and unyielding. I think you're being extremely defensive and disrespectful. This is my show, and I have every right to ask my guests whatever questions I want. If you don't like it, if you can't handle a real conversation, maybe you should have thought twice before coming here. Maybe you're not ready for this level of scrutiny. That was the breaking point. The moment where whatever thread of professionalism Jelly Roll had been holding onto just snapped. His eyes widened in disbelief, and he let out a harsh, bitter laugh that had no humor in it whatsoever. You know what, Jennifer? You're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. I should have thought twice before coming here. I should have known better than to trust someone who would use my past to try to make themselves look good, to get a viral moment, to prove they're some kind of hard-hitting journalist. I should have seen this coming. He started unhooking his microphone, ripping it off his shirt with sharp, angry movements that made it clear how done he was with the entire situation. The small clip clattered against the chair as he yanked it free from his collar. Jennifer watched him, her expression now a mix of shock, anger, and maybe just a hint of realization that this had gone too far. "What are you doing? We're in the middle of an interview," she said, but her voice had lost some of its confidence. There was uncertainty creeping in now, a recognition that she was losing control of the situation entirely. "No, we're done," Jelly Roll said firmly, his voice steady now with absolute conviction. He tossed the microphone onto the chair behind him where it bounced once before settling into the cushion. "This interview is over. I'm not going to sit here and let you disrespect me and everything I've worked for. I'm not going to let you question my worth as a human being on national television. You want to talk about my past? Fine. But you better put some damn respect on the person I am today. You better acknowledge the work I've done, the lives I've changed, the good I'm doing in this world." Jennifer's voice rose, trying to maintain control, trying to salvage something from this disaster. "You can't just walk off my show. This is completely unprofessional. We have contracts. We have commitments. You agreed to be here." Jelly Roll turned to face her one last time, his expression hard as stone, his eyes blazing with anger and hurt. "You want to talk about unprofessional? You ambushed me on live television. You pretended this was going to be a positive conversation about my music and my message, and instead, you attacked my character. You questioned my worthiness as a father, as a role model, as a human being. You used your platform to try to tear me down instead of lift me up. That's what's unprofessional. That's what's unethical. That's what's wrong." The audience was completely stunned. Some people were recording on their phones, holding them up high to capture every second of the confrontation. Others had their hands over their mouths in shock. A few people were shaking their heads, whether in disagreement with Jennifer or in disbelief at what they were witnessing. It was hard to tell. The energy in the room was electric with tension and discomfort. This was the kind of raw, unscripted moment the people would be talking about for months. Jennifer tried one more time to regain control, but her voice was desperate now, pleading almost. "Jelly Roll, I think you're overreacting. If you would just sit back down, we can talk about this like adults. We can work through this misunderstanding and continue the conversation." "Like adults?" Jelly Roll interrupted, his voice still loud but now tinged with exhaustion and disappointment rather than just anger. "Adults don't set up their guests to fail. Adults don't pretend to be supportive and then try to tear someone down. Adults don't question someone's entire value as a person because of mistakes they made when they were young and struggling. I came here in good faith, Jennifer. I came here thinking we were going to have a real conversation about redemption, about change, about hope, and you violated that trust. You used my vulnerability against me." He started walking toward the exit, his heavy footsteps echoing through the silent studio. Each step seemed to punctuate the finality of his decision. Jennifer called after him, her voice getting higher, more urgent, tinged with panic. "Where are you going? We still have 10 minutes left in the segment. You were supposed to perform. We have a whole second half planned." Jelly Roll stopped at the edge of the stage, right before the steps that would take him backstage and away from the cameras. He turned back one final time, and his voice was calmer now, but deadly serious. The anger had transformed into something else, something sadder and more profound. I'm going somewhere I'm actually respected. Somewhere people understand that everyone makes mistakes, but what matters is who you become. Somewhere people believe in second chances and don't hold your worst moments against you forever. He paused, making direct eye contact with Jennifer, and continued. I've spent years working on myself, becoming a better person, a better father, a better artist. I've gone to therapy. I've made amends with people I hurt. I've dedicated my life to helping others avoid the mistakes I made. And I'm not going to let anyone, not even you on your big fancy TV show, make me feel ashamed of that journey. I'm proud of who I am. I'm proud of how far I've come. And I'm proud that I'm walking out of here with my dignity intact. Jennifer's face flushed red with anger and embarrassment. This is incredibly disrespectful to me, to my crew, to my audience. You're walking off my show. Yeah, I am, Jelly Roll said, his voice steady and strong. Because I respect myself too much to stay in a place where I'm not valued. You wanted a show? You got one, but it's not the one you planned. With that, he turned and walked straight toward the exit. The cameras followed him as he pushed through the doors and disappeared backstage. You could hear his voice echoing back, saying something to the crew, though the microphones couldn't pick up exactly what it was. Back on stage, Jennifer stood there in shock, trying to process what had just happened. Her mouth opened and closed several times as she searched for words. The audience sat in stunned silence, nobody quite sure what to do or say. Some people were whispering to each other. Others still had their phones out recording. A producer rushed onto the stage, speaking urgently to Jennifer. She nodded, still looking dazed, and turned back to face the audience. Her usual bright energy was completely gone, replaced by visible frustration and embarrassment. Well, Jennifer said, her voice shaky and unsure. That was certainly unexpected. The audience gave a nervous, awkward laugh, but nobody seemed to know how to react. This was supposed to be a feel-good interview about inspiration and redemption, and instead, it had turned into an all-out battle that ended with the guest storming off the set. Jennifer tried to compose herself, smoothing down her outfit and taking a deep breath. "We're going to take a quick break," she announced, but her voice lacked its usual confidence. You could see the anger still simmering beneath the surface, mixed with shock at what had just transpired. As the show cut to commercial, the cameras caught Jennifer turning to her producers, gesturing wildly and clearly upset. The audience sat buzzing with conversation, everyone talking about what they'd just witnessed. Some people were defending Jelly Roll, saying Jennifer had crossed a line. Others thought he had overreacted. But everyone agreed on one thing. This was going to be talked about for a very long time. The crew scrambled around the studio, trying to figure out how to fill the rest of the show's time slot. Jelly Roll was supposed to perform a song after the interview, but clearly that wasn't happening now. The energy backstage was chaotic as people tried to manage the fallout of what had just become one of the most controversial moments in the show's history. Meanwhile, somewhere backstage, Jelly Roll was already gathering his things. Crew members who passed by him later said he looked furious, but also hurt. This was supposed to be a celebration of how far he'd come, and instead it had turned into a public confrontation about his worthiness to be successful. The whole confrontation had lasted less than 15 minutes, but it had completely derailed what was supposed to be a routine promotional appearance. What started as a seemingly innocent question about his past had escalated into a full-blown argument about respect, redemption, and whether someone's history should define their future forever. Jennifer eventually came back from the commercial break and tried to continue the show with her remaining guests, but the energy was completely different. Everyone in that studio knew they'd just witnessed something extraordinary, something that would be replayed and analyzed for days or even weeks to come. The question on everyone's mind as Jelly Roll walked out those doors was simple. Who was right? Was Jennifer justified in pressing hard questions about his past? Or did she cross a line by questioning his worthiness as a role model? Was Jelly Roll right to stand up for himself and walk off? Or should he have kept his composure and finished the interview? What nobody could deny was that this confrontation exposed a deeper issue about how we treat people who have made mistakes and worked to change their lives. Jelly Roll has been open about his past, But there's a difference between acknowledging your history and having someone use it as a weapon against you. Jennifer may have thought she was asking tough but fair questions, but to Jelly Roll, it felt like an attack on his character and his redemption. The tension in that studio was real, the anger was real, and the hurt on both sides was real. This wasn't manufactured drama or a publicity stunt. This was two people with very different perspectives clashing in a very public way, with cameras capturing every uncomfortable second. As Jelly Roll pushed through those exit doors, he made a statement that resonated with anyone who has ever felt judged for their past. He was saying that he wouldn't be made to feel ashamed of who he used to be because he's proud of who he's become. He was drawing a line in the sand and saying that respect is non-negotiable, even on someone else's show. Jennifer, for her part, seemed genuinely surprised by his reaction. Whether she realized how her questions would land or not, she clearly didn't expect the interview to explode the way it did. Her attempts to regain control only seemed to make things worse, as every word felt like gasoline on an already raging fire. The audience, caught in the middle of this confrontation, didn't know where to look or how to react. They came expecting inspiration and entertainment, and instead they got front-row seats to a real, raw moment of conflict that nobody had scripted or planned. This wasn't just about one interview gone wrong. This was about bigger questions that touch on redemption, forgiveness, judgment, and how we treat people who have changed their lives. It was about the difference between accountability and condemnation, between honest questions and veiled accusations. When Jelly Roll walked off that stage, he wasn't just leaving an interview. He was making a statement about his dignity, his worth, and his refusal to be defined by his worst moments. Whether people agree with how he handled it or not, there's no denying the power of that moment when he stood up and said, "Enough." The cameras caught it all, the rising tension, the pointed words, the angry exchanges, and finally, that definitive moment when Jelly Roll unhooked his microphone and walked away. It was television at its most uncomfortably real, the kind of moment that reminds us that behind the celebrities and the carefully produced shows, there are real people with real feelings and real limits to what they'll tolerate. As the studio doors closed behind Jelly Roll, ending one of the most explosive talk show confrontations in recent memory, one thing was clear. This conversation was far from over. The words exchanged in those heated minutes would be analyzed, debated, and discussed. People would take sides, form opinions, and argue about who was right and who was wrong. But in that moment, as Jelly Roll disappeared from view and Jennifer stood on stage trying to process what had happened, all that mattered was that line that had been crossed, that trust that had been broken, and that explosive confrontation that neither of them would forget anytime soon. The show eventually ended, the audience filed out, and the crew began breaking down the set. But the impact of what happened in those 20 seconds when everything fell apart would last much, much longer. This was the kind of moment that defines careers, shapes public perception, and becomes a permanent part of television history. Jelly Roll walked off the Jennifer Hudson show, but the reverberations of that decision, that confrontation, and those heated words would echo through Hollywood and beyond for a long time to come.